So if you think back to yesterday's lesson, we were solving quadratic formulas, solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. And our quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. And remember, we didn't have to memorize this. It'll be provided for us on the formula sheet for the EOC. So our steps when using quadratic formula: number one, make sure the equation is equal to 0. So if I look at number 1, I can see that's not equal to 0. So I'm going to need to move the 10. It's positive, so I subtract it, where I get 5x squared plus 11x plus 6 equals 0. Now that my equation equals 0, I can identify my a, my b, and my c values, and then plug into the quadratic formula. If you remember, I told you that I like to use open parentheses anytime I see a variable. That way, if I have any negatives or double negatives, where I have the squared, I don't have to worry about the different pieces. So then I just want to fill in for my variables. Negative b, so b was 11. B squared, 11 squared, minus 4 times a, 5 times c, 6. And then the denominator is 2a. And my a value here is 5. Now remember, you can go through and put this in your calculator. In order to get the division bar, you can use box over box if you're in Desmos, the slash, and then second x squared if you are in the block calculator for the square root sign. So in my calculator, I'll get negative 11 plus or minus 121 minus 4 times 5 is 20, times 6 is 120, all divided by 10. So negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 10. Square root of 1 is 1, so negative 11 plus or minus 1 over 10. Our two answers comes from negative 11 plus 1 gives me negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 10 is negative 1. Negative 11 minus 1 gives me negative 12. So negative 12 divided by 10, you have options if you want to do negative 1.2, or if you want to leave that as a fraction. 2 will go into both of those numbers. It would be negative 6 over 5. Either way, those answers are correct. So if you haven't already done so, pause the video and answer number 2. For number 2, I can see that the problem is not equal to 0. So I'm going to start by adding 8, where I have 9x squared minus 9x minus 2 equals 0. Now, since the equation is equal to 0, my a value is 9, my b value is negative 9, my c value is negative 2. So I'm going to do negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And then we're just going to plug in our values. Negative b, a, and c. Again, you can just put this directly into your calculator, or if you prefer, I can show you what this would be. Negative times a negative gives you 9 plus or minus 81, minus 4 times 9 is 36. 36 times negative 2 gives me a negative 72. And that's going to be divided by 18. 9 times 2. Okay. This becomes a keep, change. So I get 9 plus or minus the square root of 153 over 18. And it is fine if you want to leave this like this, or you can simplify to give me 1/2, because 9 divided by 18 is 1/2, plus or minus the square root of 153 divided by 18. Either one of those two answers are acceptable. So now we want to look at some real-world applications of quadratic functions. For this first one, we have the product of two consecutive integers is 30. So a couple things that we need to start with is identifying what these words mean. Anytime I see the word product, I know I need to multiply. Integers are going to be positive or negative whole numbers. The word is means equals. The other thing we need to discuss here is consecutive. So consecutive means one behind another. So 3 is consecutive to 2, it comes next. 115, the next number consecutively would be 116. So if I were to pick any random number, let's say x, we have to think about how we would get to the next number. So let's think back. If I had 3, the next number would be 4. If I had 15, the next number would be 16. I have to ask myself, what am I doing here to 3 to get to 4? Well, I'm adding 1. What am I doing to 15 to get to 16? I'm adding 1. So to find my second number that I don't know what is, I'm going to call that x plus 1. Now, I need to do what this says. Find the product of these two. So x times x plus 1 is going to equal 30. Now, we can use any of the methods that we've discussed so far. I'm going to distribute and then use the quadratic formula. So I'll get x squared plus x is equal to 30. Well, my plan is to use a quadratic formula. I know it has to equal 0, so I'm going to start by subtracting 30. Identify your A, your B, and your C. So A is 1, B is 1, C is negative 30. Then you simply just need to plug it into the quadratic formula. Remember, if you don't remember what the quadratic formula is, it is provided for you on the formula sheet. So my B value is 1, my A value is 1, my C value is negative 30. And you can just put this into your calculator, or you would get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus negative 120 all over 2. So negative 1 plus or minus 121 over 2, which gives me negative 1 plus or minus 11 over 2. So negative 1 plus 11 gives me 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then if I did negative 1 minus 11, that gives me negative 12. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. Well, I have to think here, this is not my final answer because I'm looking for two consecutive numbers. So if I start with x equals 5, the number that follows it consecutively would be x equals 6. So these two go together. And if I have x equals negative 6, then the number that follows it consecutively would be x equals negative 5. And so we want to check these to make sure that these are correct. 5 times 6 is 30, and negative 6 times negative 5 is 30. For this next one, we see one side of a rectangle is 3 feet shorter than twice the other side. Find the area of each side if find the length of each side if the area is 209 feet. So inside we know that the area of this rectangle is 209 feet squared. By reading the problem, we don't know what one side is, so we can identify it as x. And the other side is 3 feet shorter than twice the other side. Because we see than, we know the order is flip-flopped, so twice the other side, 2x minus 3. We also have to recall that in order to find the area, this is length times width. So we have x times 2x minus 3. And that is going to equal 209. So we have some options of how you want to solve this. I'm going to start by distributing the x to get 2x squared minus 3x equals 209. I like using the quadratic formula because I know that it's going to work every single time. So I need to make this problem equal 0. I'm going to do that by subtracting 209. So 2x squared minus 3x minus 209 equals 0. Then I know that my a is 2, my b is negative 3, and my c is negative 209. Plug it into the quadratic formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So negative 3, 2, negative 209, and 2. So again, we can just type this into our calculator if we want to. Otherwise, I can tell you that this will be 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 4 times 2 times negative 209. Which gives me negative 1672. All divided by 4. So I'll get 3 plus or minus the square root of 1681 all over 4. And if you put this into your calculator, it's doing all the work for you. The square root of 1681 is actually 41. So you have 3 plus or minus 41 divided by 4. And that will give me two different answers. 3 plus 41 is 44 divided by 4 is x equals 11. And then if I do 3 minus 41, that gives me negative 38, which would give me x equals negative 9.5. Well, you have to think here, we are talking about length, and it is impossible to have a negative foot. So there's only one possible answer, that x equals 11. And if x equals 11, that means 2 times 11 minus 3, 22 minus 3 is 19. That is my other side. So this length up here would be 11. This side length would be 19. For number 3, we have to make sure that we identify what these problems are asking. Okay, so first of all, how high is the object after 3 seconds? They've given me the time, so all I have to do for part A here is plug 3 in anywhere I see a t. So negative 16, I'm going to use open parentheses, t squared plus 160t plus 1200. So because it says after 3 seconds, I'm going to plug a 3 in, and then I'm going to take that equation and plug it straight into my calculator. Where I get 456 feet. Next piece, how long does it take for the object to reach its maximum height? Well, the main things we need to remember is that our x values in this case are representing our time. Our y values are representing our heights. And anytime it says maximum, I know that I'm looking for the vertex. So how long does it take to reach the maximum height? I'm looking for the x value of the vertex. Well, if you remember back, to find the x value of the vertex, you're going to use the equation x equals negative b over 2a. So we simply go into the problem. My b value is 160, so negative times 160 over 2 times negative 16. Where you can type this into your calculator to find that it is going to take 5 seconds for this to reach its maximum height. What is the maximum height? That means I'm finding the y value of the vertex, which means I'm going to take 5 and I'm going to plug it back into the problem. So negative 16 times 5 squared plus 160 times 5 plus 1200. Where I get that the maximum height is 1600. Finally here it says, how long does it take to return to the ground? When I say return to the ground, I'm looking for an x-intercept. Remember, they have more names: x-intercepts, roots, solutions, or zeros. And I can find those things by either factoring, setting my factors equal to 0, solving by completing the square, using square roots, or the quadratic formula. I'm just going to use the quadratic formula because it's the easiest. So negative b, negative 160, plus or minus the square root of 160 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 1200. All divided by 2 times negative 16. And you're simply going to type that into the calculator. Remember, you cannot do plus and minus at the same time in the calculator. So I like to just start with plus and then go in and do the minus. Where I get the first answer to be x equals negative 5. And my second answer, remember, you can just hit the up arrow and then enter on the problem and it will rewrite everything. Or you can just use your arrows to change the plus sign to the minus. And x equals 15. Well, in context of this problem, remember, time cannot be negative, so even though x equals negative 5 is an answer, it's not a feasible answer, so I'm only going to circle here the x equals